everybody, and welcome to the Brighter Together podcast. My guest today is Andrew Dolloff. Andrew is the superintendent of Yarmouth Schools in Yarmouth, Maine. He is also the author of The Trust Imperative, which came out in 2022, and he has a new book coming out in the fall of 2025 entitled Leading with Intent. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, Janet.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about you and the school, and then if you want to tell us a little about your books, I'd love to hear about them.
Sure. Yeah, I'll try to keep it brief. I could bore you for a long time, I'm sure, but this is my 38th year in public education here in the state of Maine. I'm superintendent of the Yarmouth Schools, as you said, which is a suburb just outside of Portland, Maine. On the southern coast of the state, about an hour and a half to 2 hours north of Boston. I've spent my entire life here, although I've had the opportunity recently to travel around the country and meet with educators from just about every other state in response to the book that I've written and the one that I've got coming out this fall. My wife is also an educator of 40 years. She just retired as a business educator here in the Portland area. We have 4 grown children, the youngest of whom is now 30 years old.
Happens so fast, doesn't it?
Is running a surf shop in San Diego after his graduating from college. And we have 3 daughters who are either attorneys or in the finance world here in the Northeast.
Nice.
And it's been a fantastic career. I've got some time left. And I enjoy teaching for the local University of Southern Maine in their Ed Leadership program as well. School leadership is what I know. It's my passion. I enjoy studying and learning more about it consistently. My father was my high school principal. The poor guy had to put up with me for not only 18 years at home, but 4 years in his building. And both of my sisters are teachers as well. So we come from a family of educators. We've got nieces and nephews that are now in the profession. And we believe strongly in public education and the value of it in really securing our democracy.
Nice. Very nice. Yeah. It's amazing the career that you've had and just what you've done, and that you followed in your dad's footsteps. That's neat. That's really, really neat. So
yeah, I became I became a high school principal at one point in my career, which was what he did for 28 years in one school, which is unheard of at this time. He had opportunities to step into superintendent's roles or to go work at the state level, and he just never wanted to. He felt that the principalship was the pinnacle of education, that you had the opportunity to influence so many students' lives by being in the building with them and working with their teachers. And I agree with that, but there was something that motivated me to take the next step to the superintendency, and I was fortunate to be able to do that now in 2 fantastic districts here in Greater Portland for the past 16 years.
Nice. Yeah. I think education too, it's like anything else. As we get new generations and the model changes a little bit, and I never thought I would be a CEO. I'll tell you that.
Sure.
That was not my aspiration, and here I am.
Right.
I think as educators, we'll always be educators, though, no matter when. Like you said, you're constantly learning. We are constantly learning. If you stop learning, my mom used to say, if you stop learning, Janet, you're dead.
Sure. Yeah. I think, one of the most enjoyable things for me recently has been teaching for the university and doing the speaking that I do now around the country on these 2 books, and the fact that I get to learn in those situations, on a consistent basis from the students that I'm teaching at the graduate level, who are all, teachers and counselors, and they're aspiring school leaders. But the papers that they write and the conversations that we have really help me in my daily practice, because I'm learning from people who are on the front lines what they are seeing and hearing and feeling and understanding about what's going on in the world around them and how they can better serve students. And then as I travel around the country and give presentations to new superintendent groups or experienced leaders in their various states, it's fantastic to hear what's going on in other parts of the country, to know that we're all in this together. The questions the questions are the same wherever I go. Sometimes the answers are a little bit differently or stated a little differently. Sometimes the questions are asked with a different accent. But,
For sure.
But they're the same questions, that we're all facing. I just got back from St. Louis and talked to a lot of superintendents operating out of the Midwest or the Southeast corner of the United States. And it just reaffirmed for me once again that we're all in this together. There's great work that's happening in our public schools around the country, large districts, small districts, just people that care a great deal about kids and about doing the right thing. So that's always fun to experience.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's why we decided to launch this podcast as well, because I hate that education has become so politicized. I think it always has been.
Sure.
I'm like, but it just breaks my heart for the people that are doing the work and working so hard, and and then politicians change, and then funding changes, and et cetera, et cetera. And I don't care what side of the aisle you're on, where it's about the children and about making sure that the kids get the services that they need, and that we as educators, that's what we do, and that's what we love, and so I love the fact that we get a chance to highlight leaders like yourself. You've been in it. You've seen changes in the last 38 years, no doubt. And yet you are still, and I love this about that. You said that you're still learning. You're still trying to do the best that you can for the kids that are under you, because even though you're a superintendent, that's a lot of people that you're responsible for. And pivoting when you need to pivot, and changing, and we have to keep growing. And so I love that you've done that. I'd like to ask you a little bit, if you'd tell me a little bit about the book that you've written and the one that you have coming out. I would love to give you that plug and hear a little bit more about those. That would be great if you would go there for us.
I appreciate that. I appreciate the opportunity. So The Trust Imperative was the first book that I wrote, and that really came about because of my gaining some clarity about what is important in school leadership. And I really have to say that this is something that has grown in me over the past 3 decades of being a school leader. I didn't understand 25, 30 years ago what I understand now. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I'll understand more as the ensuing years pass. But it really became clear to me through my teaching at the graduate level that what is most important, the most important characteristic of a school leader, especially in the public schools, is the ability to develop trusting relationships with staff, with students, with families, and with the community. We're really in a unique position where we might be, as school leaders, the only people who are consistently touching all 4 of those constituent groups on a daily basis.
For sure, yeah.
Teachers are much more, heavily involved with the students and some contact with parents, but not so much with the community. Mm-hmm. And as school leaders, we're interacting with all 4 of those constituent groups. And so I really had started to develop some beliefs about trust and how you build trust. And started studying other leaders and what they did to build trust. And I think a lot of these things can be done with great intention, but oftentimes they aren't. Sometimes you'll speak with a very effective leader, and they can't necessarily define why they are so effective. But if you study them and you study what they do, you'll see that what they're doing is they're using skills that they have either developed over time or skills that were inherent in their personality from a young age that allow them to develop relationships and develop trust. And so I wrote the first book really as a practitioner's guide to effective strategies for school leadership. I'm not a researcher. I don't claim to be a researcher or pretend to be a theoretician. I really am a practitioner. And that's why I wrote the book, because I felt as though there's a voice missing in the literature to a large extent. There are a handful of folks out there now doing this who are practitioners, But I felt like that voice was missing from the literature, and it was important for school leaders to have some options for readings that they could go to and learn from people who are doing the work. And since publishing that book and having the opportunity now to travel around the country and give keynote addresses at statewide school leadership meetings for principals, superintendents, special educators, and so forth, I would say that the feedback that I've received is that may be the strongest point of my presentation, is that it's coming to them from a practitioner. And because we are all facing the same questions and answering those same questions, people have more respect for what it is that I'm trying to say than they would if I were simply somebody who'd done some research but had never done the job.
Right.
So I think the practitioner's approach has been very helpful, and that's what's led to the second book.
Yeah. That empathy piece, you've been there, you've done it, you've been in the trenches, right? That's the piece. I mean, and with my company, it's the same thing. Our mission is to be a therapy company run by therapists for therapists, right? For the betterment of students. And then we talked about that earlier, how it all boils down to let's serve the kids in the best possible way. And if you can get that trust and that buy-in from your leaders, that's how, or the people that are doing the daily work, and you're leading, it's just it makes for a cohesive team, and that's super helpful. And
the
kids win, right?
Well, that's one thing that we're really trying to focus on right now, is doing what's best for kids. Our staff, teachers are very anxious right now. Teachers are nervous about how do they teach U.S. history, for example? How do you teach civics? How do you teach current events? How do you teach literature even to students at a young age and present them with characters in literature who are mirrors and windows into their own lives? Characters who look like them, talk like them, come from families like them. That whole equity piece, which has become has been given a negative connotation in some corners, and it shouldn't be. And so my message to the faculty here has been, listen, we need to continue taking care of the kids. Right. That's going to be our focus. So we need to step back from the politics, step back from the angst, and you need to hear from me as the leader of the organization that we support you. The school committee supports you, or your school leaders support you. We're going to teach the facts about American history. We're going to present students with models and examples of people and characters who represent folks who look like them and talk like them and live like them. And as long as we're taking care of the kids and keeping our focus there, we should be fine. Now, that is somewhat in doubt right now, and especially here in the state of Maine. We know that we're in a very difficult spot right now with the conflict between our governor and the President of the United States, and it's put school leaders in a very difficult position. But I have, again, tried to reassure our leaders here in the district that we just need to continue making decisions in the best interest of kids. And if we can do that empathy piece and integrity, in the first book, The Trust Imperative, there is a chapter on empathy and integrity and how those two characteristics must be demonstrated to the greatest extent in order for us to lead most effectively. And the characteristic of empathy, where we put ourselves in others' shoes and try to understand how things impact them, and integrity at the same time, doing the things that we say we're going to do, leading the way that we know we should lead, having the courage to do that. Only when you lead with empathy and integrity can you be at your most effective. And if either of those are lacking, then there are other quadrants in that matrix that I've developed, all the way down to if you lack both of those things, then you're probably leading with corruption. Right. Which I haven't seen in public school leaders, thankfully. No. But I do know that sometimes we hold the integrity of the organization too high, and that lowers the empathy with which we treat individuals. And sometimes our empathy takes over and we break down the integrity of the organization. Right. But when both of those are in harmony, then we're leading with great effectiveness.
And people pick up when you're missing one, don't they?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And we struggle with those. I will say that I'm an individual who certainly as a younger school leader at the time, the integrity of the organization clearly was probably weighed more heavily in my decision making than empathy for the individual. And so I've had to grow that in myself over time. My wife would absolutely support that statement that empathy is something that I've had to develop. Mm-hmm. And so in the book and in some of the other writings that I do, I actually talk about how you do that. And probably the biggest step toward that is to develop curiosity, because that's one of the greatest ways to show empathy in others, is to be curious about what it is that they are experiencing and how decisions impact them. And so I've found that I've had to grow my empathy by developing greater curiosity. And there are ways to grow your integrity as well and practice that. So there are things that we as leaders can do to continually improve. And we're all about that in our organization. From the time I arrived here 11 years ago, it was a highly regarded school district here in the greater Portland area. And it would be easy to rest on our laurels of high test scores and high graduation rates and students going to the finest colleges and so forth. But that's not acceptable. And I think the reason that we continue to be a highly regarded school district is that we have not rested on our laurels. We're focused on continual improvement, not just of the organization, but of ourselves, continued learning. So, we have leaders that are in PhD programs and professional development, taking advantage of professional development opportunities. Our teachers are always taking courses. We have internal professional development opportunities that we create right here in the district. And it's all about improving ourselves so that we can do a better job for kids.
That's great. And they're winning because they trust you and they're following your lead, which is great too, right? Fantastic. Tell me just a little bit, because we don't have a ton of time left, but I would love to hear a little bit of how, you have the trust imperative and then leading with intent. Where is it an extension, or I just would, and I want you to talk about it. I definitely want you to talk about it. So
yeah, I appreciate that. The second book came. I was not going to write a second book. I still haven't written the book that I really want to write. The book that I really want to write is titled "It's Not Rocket Science," and it's about the fact that school leadership is not this highly intellectual endeavor. Now, I'm not saying that it's easy.
Right.
I think that knowing what to do is the easy part. Having the courage and the conviction and the commitment and the dedication to see it through, that's the challenge. And that's why this work is extremely hard. But it's not because it's rocket science.
Right.
It's not rocket science. But anyway, that's the book I haven't written yet.
Okay, but you're going to. We know you're going to. You'll get there.
The book that I had no intention of writing came about because the publisher of my first book came back to me and said, "Hey, we think your first book did well with people. It resonated with folks. There's an opportunity here to take it further." And I said, "Well, you know what? I actually do have an idea for a second book, and it was born out of the speaking engagements that I've had around the country from the first book. And I started reaching out to individuals who had attended the keynote addresses that I had given and the workshops that I'd held, and asked them for the names of highly regarded leaders in their state. So I got responses from Minnesota, Arizona, Georgia, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Alabama, all around the country. And I reached out to those folks who were really identified by leaders in their state as being among the best. Mm-hmm. And I asked them, what do you do? What are specific things that you do to build trust in your organization? And then I wrote about them. They shared their stories with me. I put a little bit of research to it to say this is why this happens or this is why this is a great idea, and shared some of my own anecdotes and ideas as well. I shared things that that I didn't do so well at points in my career. There are some funny anecdotes in there. This book the second one is much more written from a personal voice, whereas the first one was really written in the third person and it was instructive. This one, I asked these leaders to share their ideas and thoughts, and then I added mine to them, and it's now, at the copy editing phase and should be out in the fall. And it was a real pleasure to hear from leaders, not just around the country. I have 3 or 4 people from overseas who had heard about the first book and had reached out to me, and so I reached back out to them and said, hey, tell me something you do in your school to foster trust from students, from faculty, from parents, from the community. And I got some good responses, so I put those together and called it Leading with Intent.
Very good, very, very good. I'm excited to read them. I haven't had a chance yet. I didn't have enough of a window. And my life is busy too. So, but I am really, really, and I think it's going to go hand in hand with what I do every day anyway. You don't get to the places that we're at without, it's hard work. You do hard work.
Sure. I tell everybody there, if nothing else, they're probably a good cure for insomnia. So
I like audiobooks, honestly. I'll be sitting there crocheting or something in the evenings, and I turn on my audiobooks, and So anyway, okay. So one question I always ask, because we're about to the end, is I always ask if you could miraculously solve one challenge in your school, what would you want to solve?
I think that it would be ensuring that every student comes to school from a place of nurturing and safety and good nutrition and good health, secure in who they are and where they're going after school. If we could provide that for every student, then boy, the work in schools becomes much easier.
Yeah, right.
When
they're
students come to
right?
you, when students come to you ready to learn, when they're healthy, when they're happy, when they're cared for, when they feel safe, when they are safe, when they are well nourished and healthy physically, socially, emotionally, boy, our jobs are much easier.
Right.
And we can then focus more intently on the intellectual growth. We spend a lot of our time, even in a district like ours, which is a well-resourced district with a lot of students coming from fantastic situations, but still, there's a disparity there.
Right.
And for those students who aren't coming from those situations, boy, if we could solve that problem as a nation, then we would have a much greater chance of reaching our vision of the American dream for everybody.
Yeah.
And we're just, we're not there.
No.
And we can't kid ourselves into thinking that we're there. There are a lot of people that are hurting. There are a lot of kids that are hurting that don't come from situations where they feel safe or are safe and have having their basic needs met. So if we could solve that, that's
a good one. That's a really good one, Andrew.
Fantastic.
I agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah.
This was a great conversation. Where should people go if they want to learn more about you or your school or your books?
Right. So the website is trustimperative.org.
Okay.
And that's where they can go on to learn about my books or my presentations or anything like that. The books are always available through Amazon or any of those other major sellers. And our school department site is yarmouthschools.org. And when you go on there, you'll see that our mission statement is clearly stated. We are about empowering all students. And that is a mission statement that we focus on. We talk about it daily. We hit upon it in our communications with families and with one another. And I think that that has become more clear to me over time, that when you have a strong, collaboratively developed mission, you can work toward and you make it the center of your decision-making strategies, then that's another important way to build trust with your community. When they know that you know what you're about and that your decisions are focused on that mission.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Everybody in our company knows exactly. The mission statement can't be in a book somewhere that you have to look up. It has to be a living, breathing thing. And I agree with you 1,000%.
Right.
Because it really does. It drives what you do. It drives how you think when you live it. So I'm right there with you. Right there with you. So, Well, great. Thank you so much for joining us once again. And it has been an honest to God pleasure to speak with you, Andrew. I'm so impressed with all that you've done.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure to be here, and it's been a pleasure to work with students and faculty in these great communities for so many years.
All right. Thanks again.